So this is a short video discussing SED, or the stream editor in Unix. SED is, I think it's an incredibly powerful tool. It's very simple in its language, but I find the documentation to be difficult, and it's a hard tool to learn how to use well in some ways. I don't think it's a very straightforward tool, but it's a really powerful one, and one that you can do lots of different things with if you know how to use it well. I don't necessarily know how to use it all that well, but I know how to use it for what I like to use it for. So I'm going to share some examples for about SED, teach you a little bit about it, but if you really want to become an expert of it, you can probably become a lot better at using it than me without a whole lot of effort. So, SED. It's another tool that we can use during regular expressions and text manipulations. SED is a stream editor. It's used to parse and transform text. So before, we were using grep to find regular expressions and print them to the standard output to the screen. But SED, you can actually find these regular expressions and then do stuff to them, transform them, edit them, do something to alter them. So in other words, it's a way to systematically alter a text file based on a regular expression. I think the best analogy is you're thinking of it as your find and replace tool. If you want to find some more resources on SED, this is a link that has some, I think, that are pretty useful. But the overall syntax for how we use that SED command is it's SED space, single quote, and then an expression that we use to tell SED to do some sort of activity. And SED does a lot of different things. There's way more than what I'm showing you here, but this is sort of a standard way to do a find and replace. You give it some sort of argument at the beginning. You then have a slash. You give it the regular expression, another slash, what you might replace that regular expression with, another slash, an argument, a close single quote, space, and whatever file name of the text file that you're looking at. So to show you some examples of what we might do using SED, let's use our VirtualBox example. So if I go into media and my sandbox, right, I can now see that there's this examples directory. If I go in examples, I'll find a file called SED file. If I want to see what's in SED file, it's just a bunch of words. Unix is a great OS. Unix is open source. Unix is free OS. Learn operating system. Unix, Linux, which one you choose, right? So just some text in a file. So what can I do? What can I use SED for this? So one of the things that I can do is I can use it to substitute. So I can say SED dash argument, right? I'm going to have the open single quote, then I'm going to open it. I'm going to say an S, which stands for substitute, and I'm going to replace the first instance of Unix in every line with the word Linux. Then I'm going to close my quote. I'm not going to give an argument at the end because I don't have to. And what you'll notice here, right, is that Unix has now been changed to Linux. And notice it's only the first instance. Unix here has not been changed. So it doesn't change it everywhere. It only changes the first instance. If I wanted to change the second instance, it's pretty easy to do. All I do is I put a 2 at the end of the expression in my quotes. And now you'll see that I'm going to change the second instance of Linux. If I wanted to change all of them, this is also pretty straightforward to do. I just use a G for global. And now I've changed all the Unixes to Linuxes. One thing about SED is it's actually incredibly flexible, which can make it kind of a pain in the butt at the same time, but sometimes that might be useful to us. So for instance, I can change the delimiters not to be forward slashes, but to be, say, underscores if I want to. And I just have to be consistent with them. And now you'll notice what happened is if I do 2G, right? Now from the second instance to the end of the line, I will have replaced all the Linuxes with Unix. There are other things that I can use SED for search and replace to do. I can do things like, say, SED S for substitute, Unix, and then I can give it an and sign in some curly brackets /G. And what is the and sign represents a variable for whatever is in this first position here. And so now I've just said, okay, put curly brackets around every time you find Unix. Maybe I actually, instead of just doing this once, I'm going to replace it with 2 instances of Unix surrounded by curly brackets. And so now, if I hit enter, you'll notice that instead of just having Unix there, now I'm going to have Unix in curly brackets. So you can start to see the way that, just a few simple commands could edit a giant file fairly easily. Sometimes I might even just want to pick out, one specific line, and that's not all that difficult to do either. I just need to tell SED which line I want to look at. So say I want to look at the third line, and on the third line, I'm going to replace Unix with Linux. And so we see that only on the third line has there been a change. I can do things like I can delete lines too. Also a very useful thing. So if I want to delete the second line, right, now notice this whole line has gone away. And then I can also do things like, say we're looking at this files directory here, this files folder, files.txt. I can say something like, I want to delete a range of lines, from that file. And so if we look at it now, I've deleted everything from the 5th line on down. So the first 4 lines are there, but from the 5th line on down, I've removed. So if we look at that file, we can see that I've got the first 4 lines, right? But then I've deleted from the 5th line on down. Again, if I wanted to do a regular expression search, I could use grep, right? I could say grep Unix SED files, and it's going to output something that looks like this. Or I could say sed-n, tell it what I'm looking for, and then just say p, and it's going to do function in the same way, where it's going to output the lines where it finds Unix. In the same way where I could do grep-v Unix SED file and output just operating system, I can do the same thing in SED. I just make this an exclamation point. P actually stands for print, by the way. I can even do things like insert information. So if I wanted to further edit my output, I could say something like, hey, wherever you find Unix, I want you to insert something. Say add a new line, right? And so notice that every time it finds Unix, it's going to add whatever thing I told it to add before it. If I wanted to change a line or replace a line, I could also use SED to say wherever I find that line, change it to this thing. And so that's how I can come up with this outcome. In addition to that, there are other wide range of outcomes that I could do. I could use the Y outcome to do things like capitalized letters, right? So here I'm going to replace any lowercase u or L with an uppercase U or L. Notice it even affects the U in U. So I got to be a little bit careful with how I do that. So that is SED. Very useful tool. It's kind of a complicated tool, but if you use it in a simple way, it can be a really powerful friend for you. I've found it very useful over the years for doing large-scale formatting changes to text files, and it saved me a lot of time. So it's a good tool to know. grep, sed, awk. They can be very powerful and save you lots and lots of time.